If I had listened to that pain, I would still be walking straight today. I didn't. I'm 94 years old. And I'm going to tell you something most people don't want to hear. Pain doesn't always arrive to stop you. Sometimes it arrives to warn you. And if you ignore it long enough, it stops asking. I grew up in a time when you didn't complain about your body. You worked through it. You pushed past it. You didn't sit down every time something hurt, because if you did, nothing would ever get done. That's how I was raised. My father worked with his hands until they stiffened so bad he couldn't close them at night. My mother stood on her feet all day, every day, cooking, cleaning, raising children, never once saying, "I need to rest." So when pain showed up in my life, I treated it the same way, like something to ignore, like something that didn't deserve attention. I married young, worked most of my life standing up. Kitchens, laundry rooms, anywhere they needed steady hands and someone who didn't complain. And I didn't, not even when I should have. The first time I felt it, I remember clearly. I must have been in my late 50s. A sharp pull in my lower back, just for a moment. I was lifting something heavier than I should have, but I'd done that 1,000 times before. I paused just a second, thought about sitting down, and then I said to myself, "You're fine." That phrase. I said it so many times it became automatic. You're fine. And I kept moving. That's the danger. Pain that comes and goes. It teaches you to underestimate it. Days passed. Weeks. Sometimes it would come back, a dull ache now. Not sharp. Just there. Like a quiet knock you don't feel like answering. So I didn't. I kept working. Because work needed to be done. Because people were counting on me. Because that's what I had always done. And here's the truth, ignoring pain doesn't make you strong. It makes you used to it. There's a difference. By the time I reached my 60s, that ache wasn't occasional anymore. It had settled in. Morning, I felt it. Evening, I felt it more. But I adjusted, shifted how I stood, how I moved, how I carried things. That's another thing people don't realize. The body adapts, even when it's hurting, especially when it's hurting. And those small adjustments, they come at a cost. I didn't stand straight anymore. Didn't even notice it at first. You don't see yourself the way others do. You just feel a little tighter, a little slower, a little more tired. And you tell yourself, that's just age. But it wasn't just age. It was years of ignoring something that was trying to tell me something's not right. And I didn't listen. Because listening would have meant stopping. And I didn't know how to do that. Not back then. Not yet. By the time I turned 70, my body had already made its decision. I just hadn't accepted it yet. The pain, it wasn't sharp anymore. Not like before. It had changed. That's something people don't understand. Pain doesn't always get louder. Sometimes it gets quieter and more dangerous. It became a constant. Low, heavy, always there. Like carrying something you can't put down. I'd wake up in the morning, and before my feet even touched the floor, I could feel it waiting, right there, patient. And still, I said the same thing. You're fine. I said it while I got dressed. Said it while I worked. Said it even when I had to stop halfway through a simple task, just to catch my breath and let my body settle. Because admitting it would have meant something had changed. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. There was a woman I worked with back then. Her name was Linda. She was younger than me, maybe late 50s. One day she watched me lift a basket, saw the way I shifted my weight, how I paused just a second too long. She said, "You should get that checked." Simple sentence. Kind. I smiled, waved it off. Said, "Oh, it's nothing. Just getting older." That's what we say, isn't it? We take something real and we hide it under that word, age. Because age is easier to accept than change. But she looked at me, didn't smile back. She said, "It's not nothing if it keeps coming back." I remember that. Because for a moment, I almost listened. Almost. But then the day moved on. Work needed to be finished. And that moment, it passed. That's how it happens. Not in big decisions. In small ones. Moments where you could choose to pay attention, and you don't. Years went by like that. And slowly, my world got smaller. I didn't notice it right away. That's the part that still surprises me. I stopped lifting heavy things. Then I stopped bending the way I used to. Then I started avoiding certain movements altogether. Not because I decided to. Because my body had already decided for me. That's what happens when you ignore pain long enough. It starts making choices on your behalf. Without asking. By 80, I wasn't walking the same way anymore. Shorter steps. Slower turns. Careful all the time. You lose something when you start moving like that. Not just strength. Freedom. And I told myself, this is normal. But deep down, I knew something else. This didn't happen overnight. This was built. Day by day, choice by choice. Ignoring, adjusting, continuing. Until one morning, my body stopped negotiating. And that's when I understood. I had been paying a price for years. I just hadn't seen the bill yet. It happened in the morning. That's when it usually does. When your body hasn't warmed up yet. When everything is honest. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, same as always, and when I tried to stand, my back didn't follow. Not pain, not exactly. Something tighter than that. Like a lock. Like my body had decided no more. I stayed there, sitting, hands on the edge of the mattress, waiting for it to pass. Because that's what I had trained myself to believe it will pass. Everything passes if you just wait long enough. But this time, it didn't. I tried again. Slower. Careful. And I got up, eventually. But not the way I used to. Not even close. That was the first morning I understood something had changed for good. Not temporarily. Not something I could push through. Something permanent. I walked to the kitchen. Each step measured. Each movement negotiated. And I realized I wasn't moving freely anymore. I was asking permission from my own body. That's a hard thing to accept, especially when you've spent your whole life being the one in control. That day, everything took longer. Getting dressed, making coffee, even standing still, because standing still hurt more than moving. I remember holding onto the counter just for balance and thinking, when did this happen? Because in your mind, you're still the same person. But your body, it keeps the real timeline. I called my daughter that afternoon. Didn't want to, but I did. And when she heard my voice, she knew. Children always know, even when you don't say it. She said, "Mama, what's wrong?" And for the first time, I didn't say, "I'm fine." I paused, long enough for the truth to show up. And I said, "I think I waited too long." That silence on the other end, it said everything. She came over that evening. Walked into the house, looked at me the way I used to look at her when she was sick as a child. Concern, care, and something else, realization. She helped me sit, not because I couldn't, but because she could see I was struggling. That's another thing about pain. You hide it until you can't. We talked, quietly, no drama, just truth. She said, "You should have told me." And I said something I didn't expect to say. I thought it would go away. That's the lie we tell ourselves. That if we ignore something long enough, it will leave us alone. But the body doesn't work that way. It keeps score. Every time you push through. Every time you adjust instead of address. Every time you say, "Not now," it remembers. And one day it collects. The doctor later told me things I wish I had heard years earlier. About strain. About how small injuries build. About how the body compensates until it can't anymore. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sudden. Just accumulated damage. That word stayed with me, accumulated, because that's exactly what I had done. I hadn't been injured in one moment. I had been wearing myself down for years, quietly, faithfully, proudly even. And now, I was living with the result of all those small decisions, all those ignored signals, all those times I said, "You're fine." I wasn't fine. I just wasn't listening. And by the time I finally did, my body had stopped asking me to. The weeks after that, they taught me more than the years before. Because once your body changes like that, you don't get to ignore it anymore. Every movement becomes a conversation. Every step, a decision. I couldn't rush. Couldn't pretend. Couldn't say, "I'll deal with it later." Later had already arrived. My daughter started coming by more often. Not because I asked her to, but because she saw what I hadn't wanted to show. That's the thing about getting older. The roles begin to shift. Slowly, quietly, until one day, the child is watching you the way you once watched them. She'd stand in the doorway sometimes, just observing, making sure I was steady, making sure I didn't fall. And I'll tell you something honest, that's not easy to accept. Not because of pride, but because you remember who you used to be. Strong, reliable, the one people leaned on. And now you're the one being watched, helped, considered. It changes something inside you. But here's what changed even more, my awareness. For the first time in my life, I started listening to my body, not pushing it, not ignoring it, listening. If something hurt, I stopped. If something felt wrong, I paid attention, not out of fear, but out of respect. I wish I had learned that earlier, because pain isn't the enemy. It's information. And I had spent decades treating it like something to silence. There were days I felt frustrated. Of course there were. Simple things took longer. Things I used to do without thinking now required planning, patience, care. But there was something else too. Something I didn't expect. Clarity. When you can't rush anymore, you start noticing things. The way your foot meets the floor. The way your back responds to movement. The way your body speaks, when you actually listen. I realized my body had been talking to me for years. I just never learned its language. I had treated it like a machine, something to use, something to push, something that would always keep up. But it's not a machine. It's a relationship. And I had neglected it. For a long time. One afternoon, I sat by the window, same chair, same view, and I thought about all those years I worked through pain, all those moments I said, It's nothing. And I didn't feel anger. I felt understanding because I knew why I did it. I was raised that way, taught that endurance was strength, that stopping was weakness, that you keep going no matter what. And in many ways, that mindset carried me through life. But it also cost me something. That's the truth. The same habits that help you survive can quietly harm you if you never question them. That's what I paid for. Not in one moment, but over time. Now, at 94, I move slower, careful, intentional, but I also live more aware than I ever have. And if there's one thing I would tell you, something simple, something real, it's this. Don't wait until your body forces you to listen, because one day it will stop asking nicely